The line at Customs Gate 7 had been moving for 40 minutes before it stopped. I didn't look up. I'd been through enough transit halls to know that a line stopping meant paperwork, and paperwork meant waiting, and waiting was the one thing Remy and I had both gotten very good at over 14 years. I had my duffel between my boots and my hands in my jacket pockets. Remy was sitting on my left side with his chin just above my knee, watching the hall the way he always watched things, without any particular urgency, the way a man reads a newspaper he's already read. He's a catahoula leopard dog. 72 pounds, merle coat, one blue eye, one brown. Looks like something you'd find guarding a hog pen on a Louisiana morning, which is more or less what his breed was built for. The aliens at Gate 7 had never seen one. I could tell because the junior inspector, a scaled, olive-green species I'd been told were called the veth, though I never retained alien taxonomy the way some handlers did, had been staring at Remy for the better part of 3 minutes without blinking. "Sir," she said. Her translator clipped the edges of the word. "Your companion animal. His name's Remy. We have no species designation on file for this animal." "Catahoula leopard dog," I said. "Earth. Working breed. 14 years old." She typed something. Looked at her screen. Typed again. "There is no record," she said, "of this animal type in the Compact's ecological registry." I had heard this before, in about 6 different transit systems over the years. The Compact's registry was thorough on the animals humans had made famous, the German Shepherds, the Malinois, the Rottweilers, because those were the ones that had caused the incidents worth cataloging. The catahoula had never made the list because the catahoula didn't cause incidents. It simply resolved them, and nobody who'd been present for a resolution was generally in a position to file the paperwork. "Then file it as unknown," I said. "Or don't file it. He's not going to fill out a form." Remy's tail moved once, slow, against the floor. The junior inspector looked at the supervisor. The supervisor was a different species, broader, slate-gray skin, 4-fingered hands, the kind of bulk that made armor look redundant. She came down from the raised platform and stood at the gate barrier looking at Remy the way you look at something you've decided you don't need to be afraid of but haven't quite finished deciding. "Is the animal a certified protection unit?" she asked. "He's retired," I said. "We both are." She studied him for another few seconds. Remy looked back at her with his mismatched eyes and did nothing at all, which was, in my experience, more unsettling to people than any amount of snarling would have been. You can prepare yourself for a dog that shows its teeth. You cannot prepare yourself for a dog that simply watches you with the focused, patient attention of something that has done this a very long time and found it mostly uninteresting. "He may proceed," she said, and went back to her platform. We moved through. The secondary inspection area was a wide low room with benches along the walls and a processing desk at the far end. The ceiling was low enough that the overhead lighting panels sat maybe 8 feet up, and the whole room had the flat, recycled air smell of a space that processed a lot of people and didn't much care whether they found it comfortable. There were maybe 20 people waiting, a mix of species, mostly freight runners and contract workers by the look of them, a few in the coveralls of the Hesker shipping lines. One elderly human woman with a cart stacked high with sealed containers who had the patient expression of someone who had been doing this for decades and intended to keep doing it for decades more. 2 uniformed compact security officers stood at the desk. There was a third figure I noticed because he was standing when everyone else was sitting, leaning against the wall beside the exit corridor with his arms folded and his eyes on me from the moment I walked in. I had spent 11 years in active canine service and 3 years in advisory work, and I had learned a long time ago to trust the read I got in the first 4 seconds. The read I got in the first 4 seconds was that the man against the wall was not a freight runner and was not waiting for paperwork. Remy's nose moved. Just once. He didn't look at the man. He kept pace with me to the bench, waited while I sat, and then sat down himself, very close, and put his chin on my knee again. But his ears had shifted. The angle was small. If you didn't know to look for it, you wouldn't have seen it. I knew to look for it. The man pushed off the wall 20 seconds later. He moved in the casual way that people move when they want to look casual, which is a different thing from actually being casual, and the difference is always in the hands. His hands were coming out of his pockets. I said, quietly, Remy. That was all I said. What happened next took approximately no time. The man was close, too close, which had been his miscalculation, and Remy was old, but old working dogs are not slow, they are simply deliberate, and deliberate at Remy's speed was still faster than anything that man had planned for. There was no barking. There was no growling. The room went very quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something has been decided that nobody present fully understands yet. And then there were boots on the floor and the two compact security officers were moving and I was still sitting on the bench with my hands in my pockets. I did not look at what was behind me. I looked at the processing desk. The officer at the desk was staring at me. The other one was on a calm unit, speaking quietly. The rest of the room had done what waiting rooms do when something unexpected happens, compressed, gone still, every face turned toward the source of the disruption except for the elderly woman with the cart, who had apparently decided it was none of her business and was reading something on a small screen. He retired, I said, he didn't forget. They kept us in the secondary area for another hour while they sorted out the paperwork. This was fine. I had nowhere to be until the 1800 connector, and Remy slept the whole time, heavy against my right boot, with the slow, even breathing of a dog who had done his accounting and found the numbers satisfactory. The supervisor came down from gate 7 again around the 40-minute mark. She had a data tablet and the expression of someone who had been asked a question she didn't have a good answer for. The animal, she said, standing in front of me. It is not on record anywhere in the compact registry. I know, I said. I have tried 4 separate databases. There is no classification, no threat assessment, no behavioral profile. As far as our systems are concerned, this animal does not exist in any formal ecological record. I looked down at Remy. He was asleep, one paw over the other, the merle coat rising and falling. The brown eye was closed. The blue one was almost closed. The slow wag had stopped when he fell asleep. He's from Louisiana, I said. Originally. The breed goes back a few hundred years, give or take. People used them to hunt wild boar, drive cattle, track game through swamp terrain. They're not famous. They never needed to be. The supervisor looked at the data tablet. She looked at Remy. What should I enter in the classification field, she asked. I thought about it for a second. 14 years old, I said. Working dog, retired. Origin, Earth. Temperament, calm. I paused. You can leave the threat assessment field blank. He won't contest it. She wrote something. She left. The connector was on time. We got a forward seat because Remy needed the floor space, which was a standing arrangement I'd negotiated on about 100 different vessels over the years. He took up most of the legroom and none of the conversation, which had always seemed like a reasonable trade to everyone involved. I had a coffee from the service cart and watched the station fall away through the viewport. The attendant who brought the coffee was a young species I didn't recognize, slight, pale violet, with careful hands. She looked at Remy for a long moment. Is he dangerous? She asked. I looked at him. He was asleep on my boot again, which seemed to be his preferred place to be, had been for 14 years, would be until it wasn't. Not to you, I said. She seemed to find that satisfying enough. She moved on down the aisle. Outside the viewport the station was a lit cluster against the dark, already small. Somewhere in the secondary inspection hall, I imagined, a supervisor was still working out what to enter in a classification field for an animal that had no entry in any registry, had never needed one, and had spent the better part of its life doing a job that didn't require anyone to know its name in advance. I drank the coffee. Remy slept. The connector moved on.